Is it possible to double your profits without doubling your prices? I'm going to show you the simple math behind this, walking you through a very, very simple spreadsheet. I'm going to show you how to do like a margin analysis, and I'm going to show you why it's actually easier to increase your profits whenever your margins may be lower. And if you're watching this, this is going to probably go one of two ways. Either you have these numbers available to you and you're going to think, wow, this is really helpful. Now I know what to do with this information. Or you might be thinking, and this is totally fine because this is probably most people, you might be thinking, I don't even know what these numbers are for my own business, but now you know why it's important to track these things. Okay, let's jump into this spreadsheet. I considered coming up with a really fancy, pretty spreadsheet with all kinds of formulas in it to show you this, but I actually figured it'd be better to show you this way because this doesn't have to be complicated or over the top. So at its basic, your P&L, your profit and loss, like the thing that tells you whether or not you've made money, is made up of just 5 components. How much you sell your stuff for. So we can do this on a per item basis, or we can do this on a like entire year activity. It all comes out the same. The math is easier to track whenever we take things down to the simplest form. So sales price, this would also be considered revenue, income, total income, whatever. It's basically what you get from a customer. And then your cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold. You might see this as COGS. This is just how much did you have to pay to get the item that you sold to your customer. There's different things that might go into this, but let's pretend in a simple world that you are just printing your books. And so you're paying for that inventory and then you're having to turn around and sell that book. So you might buy the book for $5 and sell it for $20. Okay. So sales price, cost of goods sold. If you take sales price minus cost of goods sold, you get your gross profit, or you might hear this as your gross margin or your gross profit margin. This is just the difference between, or this is basically how much of what you sell do you get to keep to cover your overhead. All right. From there, we subtract out your overhead. This would be the expenses that really don't change no matter how much you sell. Now, you might have some like economies of scale or even negative economies of scale. Economies of scale is just when the relative cost per thing decreases as you do more of it. But you can also have the reverse of that. So think of things where, like a newsletter subscription, you might get charged a certain amount up until you get a certain number of subscribers, and then the cost actually increases. The cost per subscriber might decrease in total, but that total subscriber count doesn't necessarily equal sales price. So anyway, overhead would be like your software subscriptions, any incidental supplies, journals, professional fees, anything you need to run the business that isn't a direct cost of the thing you just sold. So after you subtract your overhead from gross profit, you get your net income or your net loss or your net profit or your profit, whatever you want to call it. It's just the bottom line. So we have sales price. Let's pretend it is $20. And let's say that that book costs you $5. So your gross profit is just the 20 minus the 5. Your gross profit is $15. I'm just going to put a simple line here to make it easier to track. Then your overhead. Let's say we broke this down on a per item basis. I wouldn't recommend doing this, but just for the purpose of this spreadsheet, let's say that our overhead is $20. You can already see the issue here. We only have $15 to cover the $20 of overhead. And so we have a net loss of $5. In accounting, the bottom line, we do a double underline at the bottom. So what does this mean? Let's put some percentages, because whenever we put percentages, everything starts to make a little bit more sense. So this would be your dollars and this would be your percents. We're going to base everything off of sales price right now, or your revenue. So revenue divided by revenue is 100%. This is 100% of the total. Your gross profit. So this would be your gross profit margin or your gross profit percentage. This would be 75%. For every dollar that you sell, you get to keep 75 cents of that. And the other 25 cents goes to paying for the inventory that you just sold. And then we're going to do the same thing on net income. We're going to do this as a percentage of this, and it's going to be a negative. You can already see that. So it's a negative 25%. All right. So this is just a really basic walkthrough of how you would look at your margins and your percentages. Now, let's say we wanted to double this gross profit. If we wanted to double that gross profit, let me just copy everything over to here. I'm just realizing how hard this may be to see. I'm going to zoom in just in case. I'll have to do some post editing. Hopefully I don't have to record this again. But let's say we want to double it. If we wanted this number to be double, it would need to be 30 instead of 15, right? 15 plus 15 is 30. That's easy. So if the cost of goods sold doesn't increase, and again, this cost of goods sold might actually decrease if you sell more items, but if you raise your prices, you might sell less items. And so the cost of goods sold per item might increase a little bit. We're going to pretend that that doesn't change on this like marginal incremental level. So if we added 15 to this, we get $35 sales price and we get a gross profit of 30. But look at what happened. 15 is not 100% of 20, obviously. We didn't have to double our sales price, in other words, to get a double gross profit. And it's just because of the way that percentages work. If you add a number to a small number, you get a bigger percentage increase than if you add that same number to a larger number, right? Let's just say I had 15 and I had 150. If I add 1 to each of them, 1 is going to be, what's this? 6.7% of the total. I'm so sorry. And this is going to be 0.7% of the total. So it's a much different percentage, even though it's the same dollar amount going into it, just because of the way you got to think about conceptually the way percentages work. And once you see this, it makes sense. But in practical terms, it's like we feel like if we want to double our profit, we have to double our prices. And that's not the case. In this case, we would have to increase our prices by 75% in order to get a 100% increase in gross profit. But I want to show you some cool math here and why this makes sense. So this is where it's going to get a little bit nerdy. If we want to figure out, like, let's say we know what our gross profit percentage is, and we know what we want the increase in gross profit to be. We know what we want that percentage increase to be. And in this case, we want that to increase by 100%. If you just take the desired increase 100%, times your margin, and that margin is this number here, it's your gross profit divided by your sales price. So let's say it's this. Take those two numbers, multiply it together, and you get the percentage increase you have to have in your sales price in order to get that. Now, these numbers look like, well, of course it makes sense, but let's change the numbers up some. Let's just say we needed to do, I don't know, let's say that this was $15 and we were only making $5. And so we had a 25% gross margin. Let's plug the numbers in this way. So it's a formula. We would need to increase our sales price by 25%. And let's check it to see if that makes sense. Sales price right now is $20. And we need to increase that by 25%. So we're going to add those two together. That's the increase. We would have to sell this for $25. If this cost of goods sold doesn't change, then that $5 increase to sales price, which is only a 25% increase, would add $5 to our gross profit. And that $5 increase in gross profit is a 100% increase because it doubled. And so when you do the math on this, what's really interesting is if you have a lower margin before the increase, then the percentage increase for your sales price is actually less than what you would be if it was a larger margin. So this is looking at things on a like per item basis, but you could do the exact same math, even if it was say $20,000 and $15,000 and $20,000, or let's say 2,000 for funsies. You do the same exact math and it all works out the same, except the difference here is you'll have to say, okay, if I'm increasing my total revenue, if I need to increase my total revenue by 25% or whatever the thing is, then how much do I need? What do I need to do that? You could increase your prices or you could increase your volume. How would you increase your volume? Well, you might have to invest in more ads. But if you do that, that's going to increase your overhead. And so then that might affect your net income. Maybe you need to change your lead flow. Maybe you need to change your freebie that you give out or whatever it is. But just know that any lever you pull might change something else. So even if we say, well, we're just going to raise our prices, if you increase your prices, it's going to obviously increase your average order value, like how much do people spend whenever they buy something from you, but it might decrease your conversion. So it might decrease the number of people who buy things from you. So every single thing you do is built on a series of levers and things that you can do to affect things. So like just this top line here can be made up of so many different factors. You have, let's say we call them leads. Maybe it's just interest. Maybe it is clicks. Maybe it's impressions. whatever it is, the number of people who know about you, right? And then from there, you're going to have some people who know about you and then they actually buy. And that would be your conversion rate. So goes from here to here. If you just take the percentage of people who saw you that actually bought, that's your conversion rate. And then you take their average order value. So of the people who buy from you, how much do they normally spend on average? And then from there, you can say, well, what's your gross profit? How much do you actually get to keep of every dollar that they give you? And from that, you can kind of reverse engineer what you're looking for. If you need this $20,000 to be $25,000, then we start looking through all these different things. Maybe you don't need this $20,000 to be 25, because at the end of the day, what we really care about is gross profit. What if instead we can increase the gross profit by possibly getting our books for a little bit cheaper, or maybe making sure that we're charging our customers for shipping if we are paying the shipping ourselves, or maybe changing that free shipping threshold. But there's different ways to increase your gross profit margin, either by lowering your costs or raising your prices. Your average order value, you could increase that without even raising your prices. If you can encourage people to bundle books instead of buying one book at a time, then you get more of that money up front. You can maybe increase your conversion rate by updating the copy on your website, making sure that the shopping cart thing is working the way that it should, making sure that the images are really good and people are wanting to buy. And then you can increase the amount of people who are actually looking at your stuff by getting better ads, by targeting better, or improving your ads, fixing your pixels, whatever it is that goes into that. The point is, this whole P&L, profit and loss, income statement, whatever you want to call it, it's a report card. This just tells you how you did. And so you look at this and you say, am I happy with these results? If you are happy with those results, then you need to figure out what you need to do to replicate that. And if you're not happy with those results, then you start digging in. The order that I would normally do things is first, look at your overhead. It's probably some really low-hanging fruit here for things that you can cancel. Free trial subscriptions that you forgot had a free trial that expired, software that you're no longer using, other costs that you might have that you may be able to trim down. The next thing I would do is start looking at this top line here and go through this 4-part funnel from leads to conversion rate to average order value to gross profit margin, and figure out if there's a way to increase that piece. And then the last thing I would do is look at decreasing your cost of goods sold. And the only reason I would do that last for an author is because there's not a ton that you can do there outside of volume discounts if you're ordering your own books from overseas or from any printer, even if it's onshore. And I don't recommend making a larger inventory purchase than you need just to save on the per item cost. The only thing I would say that is low-hanging fruit here and cost of goods sold would be making sure that you are adequately charging your customers for shipping, and that you're not absorbing things like the box and the packing materials. Then it's not just what you're paying to UPS or USPS, it's the actual time and the materials that go into it. All of this is very obviously geared towards direct sales. If you're doing Amazon, KU, or KDP, a lot of this just becomes irrelevant, but you can still do this same math and analyze it the same way. Just know that if you're like totally in the Amazon ecosystem, you're going to be limited on how much data that you can actually get in order to move the levers the way that you need them to be moved. Okay, I know that got a little bit messy towards the end there, but the point is, whenever you want to make a change in your business, you want different results, then you have to change something else. And so it's helpful to just have a basic framework for how much money you're making and how much it's costing you to make that money, so that you know what levers to pull, you know what actions to take to affect that change. I see too many times people focusing on things that don't impact the thing that they're trying to change. They might focus on getting more Instagram likes, but their Instagram likes don't translate to sales. They might try and get more newsletter subscribers, that might not translate to sales. One of the purposes for getting financial information and having good bookkeeping and good records is so that you can test things that you think might impact the results and then check those changes against the actual results. It's not enough to say you're just going to increase your ad spend and see if that results in more sales. You actually have to track it and see if it is increasing your sales by more than it's increasing your ad spend. And the other thing that I really hope I got across with this is that your system for tracking things and the way that you analyze your numbers does not have to be overly complicated. You can start off with a simple spreadsheet or even just pen and paper to get the ideas down and then build it from there into what you need. Don't build an overly complicated financial system that you're not going to use just to find out that you don't even need it. You just needed something really simple. I hope that this was helpful, and I will see you next time.